great to be here at this conference. Today I'll be speaking to you about a bit about MetaGameHub DAO, what we do, and how we kind of take a bit more diversified and like metaverse agnostic approach to this entire metaverse topic, right? That's currently ongoing. Let me maybe quickly start by saying, okay, personally, right, I'm not necessarily a fan per se of really the term metaverse per se, right? Because it can be a bit contradicting. I like the term open metaverse a bit more, where kind of, there's not going to be one metaverse to rule them all, obviously. We all know this, I think, at this point. I see it kind of more like Decentraland is like New York, the Sandbox is like LA or Denver, right? And so each metaverse kind of has its own niches that it covers, right? And if we start understanding this, then we also understand why all these different metaverse platforms are emerging at this point. And that's what I'll be speaking to you about a bit and how we at MGH DAO are actually approaching this topic. So initially, kind of when we started MGH, we we had kind of the idea to have a DAO that is collaboratively investing and governing in lands and other metaverse assets, right? And why? Because right now we have all this land hype ongoing and all these things, right? But at the end of the day, while everyone is always preaching about decentralization, if we really look at the land ownership, it is still fairly centralized right now. And if you look especially at the land prices, right, it's crazy what's going on there, and it's not really something that the true users within these metaverse platforms can leverage, right? Which is why we kind of decided, okay, we take a different approach in regards to actually through the assets that we have in our treasury, allowing people in our community to actually have that feeling of ownership when it comes to valuable metaverse assets, right? And that's kind of the first point that we wanted to cope with. The next point was then that we realized, okay, we can't just start a DAO, raise funds, and just buy overpriced assets, right? So we then started developing valuation tool and algorithm, to be exact, right? Where we work together with a couple of institutional algorithm developers and so on that are contributors to our DAO, have worked with a lot of institutions, for instance, in LATAM, that then basically developed an algorithm that allows the fair price valuation for lands, which at the end of the day is kind of like the low-hanging fruit, right? When it comes to generally the NFT space, that we have a more neutral approach in regards to how we evaluate these assets. We started and we still approach this with more the metaverse asset approach, right? Not necessarily the culture or the art NFTs, because metaverse assets are just more financialized, therefore more standardized and easier to evaluate by an algorithm, right? So we developed this algorithm, which is now live. You can check out our land valuation tool, for instance, in our DApp, that allows you to actually evaluate lands in the Sandbox, Decentraland, and soon we'll also having the launch for Axie, Fluffworld, Zone, Somnium Space, and others. The next part then is we have all this data from the algorithm, right? But generally, when it comes to the metaverse, there's a lack of data utilization still ongoing, right? Data is not something, it's one of the biggest, most valuable assets out there, but it's not something that really is attractive. And the metaverse really has a power to make data an attractive asset. And if we don't, let's say, have decentralized data ownership there and data sovereignty for the people, then these metaverse providers are going to be even more powerful than Facebook slash Meta, right? Because there's just so much data that is produced in these metaverse platforms. So therefore, as mentioned before, we developed the algorithm, and now we are also utilizing then this data for other aspects, such as, we have a data set and a data pool there for the Ocean Protocols marketplace. We have our own chaining node to allow on-chain pricing valuations and so on to really utilize this data efficiently. In the future, we'll also have other endeavors in that regard. So the last part kind of that we discovered that also kind of goes hand in hand with part one is that generally right now there's still a limited access, right? When it comes to the metaverse, we have all this hype ongoing, but what really is the metaverse? How can you really engage with it? How can you access it? And therefore, apart from the portfolio of metaverse assets, we are complementary to this building tools such as the valuation tool, but also others that go into the direction of MetaFi, which is a convergence between metaverse assets and DeFi and integrating them, which is kind of like the low-hanging fruit, not so much in my opinion security tokens, right, in regards to integrating into DeFi, but that's a different topic. And also going into the direction of course, metaverse identity and other forms of assets and generally, tools that help people to actually navigate. The core long-term vision here really is that imagine the way you pull out your phone in the real world, these metaverse, and you open an app, right, to so to say navigate through the real world. or whether it's booking.com or something else, right? Similarly to this, I envision the dApps that we create to be at some point directly integrated into the metaverses. So when you walk around the sandbox, Decentraland, and so on, you can actually leverage these tools. Basically, I'll keep it short here, right? We all know that the metaverse is a huge industry, right? But at the end of the day, that I envision it, right? We currently have kind of like a hype when it comes to the, so to say, layer one infrastructure, right? To use kind of the blockchain terms here. But the next steps in adoption really come from applications and communities that build around these applications. And these are kind of the two parts where we as MGH DAO are coming in, right? And we provide, so to say, a hub, therefore also the name hub in MetaGameHub DAO, and where we are, so to say, that hub for adoption and applications and also community building within the open metaverse. So in a nutshell, right, I've already talked about this. We have on the one hand the metaverse assets and the respective development thereof, which we conduct through the working groups. We have on the other hand the metaverse tools, such as the land valuation tool. We have upcoming NFT pools for metaverse assets, lands, especially in the sandbox and Decentraland. We also have upcoming perpetual land swaps, which will be integrated in our dApp, as well as other tools that we're currently building, such as a Decentraland editor, that is basically an SDK that makes it much more intuitive for developers in Decentraland to actually build infrastructure, which is something that surprisingly wasn't there yet. So we have these two angles, right? And basically, we have on one hand the treasury, right, as mentioned, and on the other hand, we have then the working groups, which are basically conducting the operations. And any revenue that is then generated from these, let's say, assets, as well as the tools via, for instance, subscription-based models, this revenue then has a direct impact on the one hand on the treasury, as of course, a portion of the revenue goes back to the treasury to be able to reinvest, for instance, in other metaverse assets, while at the same time, also another portion of the revenue is leveraging autonomous buyback and burn mechanisms to actually have an, so to say, deflationary impact in the long run on our MGH DAO utility token. Because personally, I'm not a big fan of, let's say, having a governance token or utility token where the only utility is the governance, let's say it like this, because then you could just have an NFT where one NFT is a vote, right? So therefore, really, we want to, and we did create and design the token in a way that it's really the oil in our ecosystem, and also holders are, of course, incentivized, right? But that's enough for token talk today. So as you can see here, here's just a couple of examples, right? So on the top left, right, you can see the Decentraland editor, which is the SDK I mentioned. We're also building, for instance, on our premium Snoop Dogg land in the sandbox. We are already developing some metaverse soccer tools for a European soccer club, as well as developing, for instance, a hub for our community in Decentraland, as well as Sonium Space, where we can then also in these ecosystems, of course, have play-to-earn games ongoing and stuff like this, community hubs, really something for everyone, right? And therefore, we also kind of say the decentralized state, a decentralized country, so to say, in the open metaverse, because really, we envision it, if you're part of MGH DAO, right, you really have everything you need for your metaverse experience, and that's how we built it. So as I mentioned before, we have a revenue model, but just for some clarification here, I know this, I can't probably go over it in this quick talk, but if you're interested, I can definitely share the slides with you. But that's generally how the revenue works, right? The revenue comes in basically from the community, the users, it goes to DAO Metaverse portal, from when then basically it has two streams. On the one hand, it goes back to the DAO operations via the treasury, or alternatively, the other 50% go back to the, so to say, creating buying pressure in a secondary market autonomously, and then burning these tokens to have these deflationary metrics in place, right? When it comes to the data tools, I already talked about this a bit. We have the dApp, right, where we have the valuation tool, but we also, as mentioned, then are hosting an on-chaining node to provide on-chain data. We have the dataset and Ocean protocol, as well as we allow widget creations or direct API access, for instance, for asset managers, DeFi protocols, as well as NFT marketplaces that can then leverage basically the algorithm's data for their respective purposes, right? For instance, to collateralize NFTs and DeFi protocols, to have fair pricings for metaverse assets and NFT marketplaces, and so on. So we are quite diverse when it comes to this, and data is really a crucial part in our MGH DAO model. In our roadmap, or what we've achieved so far, right, We've already completed a founding round of around 1.6 million, which was barely VC backed, right? We did it fully community based. We then also launched our first tools. We have right now an average of 30,000 requests per month for evaluation tool. We already migrated to a couple of chains, and the next kind of months are really all about further growing the community and expanding across the different metaverses and integrating our tools and aggregating really across different platforms. We've already established a strong team of core contributors, right? Working with a lot of the bigger players in the industry directly with them, and we are always happy to have more talent onboarded to our DAO. There's really something for everyone, whether you're an investor, a data scientist, whether you're interested in games, the metaverse, and if you're an NFT collector, DeFi, or generally you're a DeFi, degen, right? There's something for everyone in MGH DAO, and that's why we also have a different set of working groups that you can join, and I encourage you to, of course, join them, reach out to us at any time, and yeah, become part of our mission to really foster decentralization and transparency within the open metaverse. So at this point, thank you guys for listening, and have a great day, and time at DAODenver.